Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. Every scale exercise or arpeggio exercise that you play, you should consider a melodic building block. You really only want to practice the things that you want to use when you're soloing. And it's also important to realize that it's not enough just to play the right notes over each of the chords. You also have to play a melody that's strong and that really makes sense if you want to play a good solo. Triads is one of the strongest melodic building blocks that we have. And it doesn't really matter if you're checking out Wes Montgomery or Rosenwinkel or Lage. Everybody is using triads and you want to have that in your vocabulary and you want to use it in your solo. In this video I'm going to go over some different triad ideas, check out some inversions and some different patterns and some spread voice triads and show you how you can use that. I'm going to do that by giving you a 2-5-1 lick that's using one of these patterns and then also some exercises. So you're not only going to get some triad ideas, you can also really test how good you are at playing your scales, because some of those diatonic triad exercises are pretty difficult to play. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, improve the way that you solo, check out some interesting arpeggios or chord voicings, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. One of the most effective ways to practice your arpeggios is to practice them as diatonic arpeggios. And there's a reason for that, because when you're improvising, then you might be playing an arpeggio, but at that time in the song, then there's a chord happening, and on the chord you have a scale, and the arpeggio is a part of that scale. So you kind of have two layers. You have the arpeggio that you're using on the chord, and then you also have the rest of the notes that are available, and that's the scale. So it makes a lot of sense to practice your arpeggios in that scale, because then you already have a connection between the larger context and then the notes that you're using at that point. And it's also because when you're using the arpeggio, then the rest of the line is probably going to be made out of scale notes from that scale. The first example here is really a good example of how you can superimpose diatonic triads onto the chords. So in the first line, so I'm starting off with a chromatic enclosure, targeting the F on B3, and from there I play an F major triad. And this is on the D minor 7 chord. So if you look at what the notes are in a D minor 7, then that would be D, F, A and C. And then the triad I'm using is the F major triad, so that's just the top 3 notes of those. And that way I'm just using this upper structure triad. It makes a lot of sense to just check out what the different triads are against the chord, so you have an idea about what will work and what doesn't work. From there I continue with a G major triad on the G7, and then a short D minor pentatonic fragment, and then on the C major 7 I'm using actually 3 different triads. So first the one from the 3rd, so E minor, then A minor, and then a G major. And that's because then I get from the E minor I have the 3rd, the 5th and the 7th. Then on the A minor that's the 6th or the 13th, the root and the 3rd. So everything is really easily related to the chord. And then the last one is the G major, so that's the 5th, the 7th and also the 9th. These basic diatonic triads are really important to practice, and also, as you can tell, really useful to know. And there are 2 ways I would suggest you practice them. The first one would be to just take the scale, so any kind of C major scale in this case that you want to use and that you play, and then try and play that in diatonic triads. That could be something like this. The other way you want to practice this is probably to take them along the neck. So if I start with a middle string set, the first triad, the first diatonic triad I have here is then the F major triad, and then I get this exercise. It's important that when you're practicing this, then keep in mind what triad you're playing. So you kind of need to know what triads are found where. So you want to know that C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and then back to C. You want to know which triad is where, and it also is very useful to try and relate all the different notes to the different roots. So think about what would work and what's possible on the D minor by just looking at well, if I play the F major, then I have the 3rd, the 5th and the 7th, and if I play the B diminished triad, then I have the 13th, the root and the 3rd. And then you can also experiment a little bit with what notes will sound well and figure out if you like the sound of that when you're using it in your solos. The first variation is to start working with inversions. And here I'm using the first inversion. So the first inversion, if we have the C major triad like this, C, E, G, then an inversion is just to take the C and move it up an octave and then play from what is now the lowest note, that would be the E. So then instead of having C, E, G, we now have E, G, and C. And that's what I'm using here. On the D minor, I'm starting with the D minor triad in first inversion, so I'm starting on the third, F, A, D. And then from here I'm moving to an A minor triad and playing that, so that's C, E, and A. Now, the A minor triad against the D minor is the C, which is the 7th, E is the 9, and then A is the 5th. And then on the G7 altered, first B augmented triad, and that's really not an inversion at this point, even though augmented triads are symmetrical, so if you invert them, you're just going to get another augmented triad. And then from there I move on to a D flat first inversion major triad, so that's F, A flat, D flat. In that case that's of course the 7th, the flat 9 and the flat 5. And then resolving that to C, where I'm coming out on the G here, and then playing a C major first inversion, so E, G, C, and then down an A minor first inversion triad, A, E, and C. And of course you want to practice this through the scale, and that will be something like this. A lot of the time the difficult part of practicing this is that you have to start thinking of the triad from the third and not from the root, which is what we're used to. But that's an extremely good exercise, and it's also really going to help you get an overview of what the notes are in the triad, so that you can really think, okay, I'm playing a G major first inversion triad, so I'm starting on B, and then going up to D, and then G, and then we get A minor, so the third is C, and then E, A, and so on and so forth. And that's just a great exercise. I think when you're actually just playing it without naming the notes, you can get pretty far by just learning the melody and then sort of playing it by ear through the scale, which is also useful to check out because you're also relying on your ear a lot when you're playing scale exercises, and of course also when you're soloing. Of course, when I'm talking about the first inversion of the triad, it makes sense also to just take a look at the second inversion. So the first inversion is of course, so first the root position, then the first inversion, which is starting on E. Now if we start the triad on the 5th, and then move up to the root and up to the 3rd, then we have the second inversion. So, and in this case I'm using it in line using some diatonic passing chords. So the first triad I'm playing is just a D minor first inversion, then I'm moving that up and playing an E minor first inversion, and then moving up again to an F minor first inversion, and then from there a G major, and then using a short scale melody to resolve to the 3rd of C major 7. So the idea here is that I'm using a dominant that's coming out of C minor, so I'm using C harmonic minor on the G7, and then I'm using a chord, an extra chord from C harmonic minor, because I'm first playing the D minor, and then E minor, and then F minor, which is kind of borrowed from C harmonic minor in this case, moving up to G7 and then resolving that to C major. So the F minor here is actually coming out of C harmonic minor, and I'm also playing a little bit with the rhythm because I'm actually starting the F minor already in the D minor bar, so it's also moving a bit rhythmically, but it's a nice trick to work with, and using material from the minor on the minor key on the dominant is a really good idea if you want to get some variation into your lines. And again, of course, you can practice this in the scale, and if we do 1 octave of second inversion triads, then that will be this. As I said in the beginning, it's important that you think about these different triads and different exercises as melodies, and you also want to be aware of the fact that melodically there's a difference between playing a triad as just being 1, 3, 5 and then playing them in a different order. So it makes sense to also check out some different patterns with the triads. So in this case I'm only going to cover one. There are a lot of different patterns you can use, of course, but instead of playing 1, 3, 5 you can also play 3, 1, 5, and this introduces a nice fifth interval that you can also use, which is going to break up the lines in a really nice way, I think. So in the example I'm using that starting on the A, so I'm using an F major triad on the D minor, and then first A and then down to the F and then up to the C. So that's for an F major triad 3, 1, 5, and then from here I'm moving on to a D sus4 triad, which is another great structure that you can use on your chords, but I'm not gonna really go into that in this video. So we have, and then from here just a small diatonic third movement, so from E up to G. And then on the G7 I'm using a G7 altered, and I'm playing first an F diminished triad, so, and then playing that like 3, 1, 5, and then G diminished, 3, 1, 5, and then up to the E flat and down to the B, and then resolving to the 9th of the C. And then from here I'm also playing an A minor triad as 3, 1, 5. Practicing this through the scale sounds like this. And I think this is a good example of a melody also as an exercise, that you can really hear how natural the melody is. And probably you can play it, if you know your diatonic triads, you can fairly easily play this just by trying to hear how it's going to sound for the next step in the scale. And then you don't have to think about what notes you're playing. Of course, you do want to think about that in the long run, but it is worth noticing that you can kind of do this by ear. The reason I can keep on publishing videos every week is that I have a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for that, and if you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. If you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. This example is using a spread triad or an open voice triad, and the way you construct this is if we take the C major triad again, so C, E, G, then if you take the second note, the E, and then move that up an octave, then you have this structure. And that's a really sort of nice chord, and you can of course make inversions of it as well. And you can use that both as chords, and that will work quite well, and it's also a great arpeggio, mainly because it has really a lot of really large intervals, but it's still pretty consonant and easy to make melodies with. In the example, I'm starting with a D minor first inversion spread voice triad, so F and then up to the D, and then up to the 5th, the A, and then a scale one. And this is really just when you have this sort of these large intervals and a lot of movement in one direction, then I'm kind of resolving that melody by just moving stepwise in the opposite direction, so a descending scale one. And then on the G7 altered, I'm first using an E flat major first inversion triad on top of the G7, so that's giving me the flat 13, the root, and then the sharp 9, so really some altered sounds in there. And I'm playing that first the E flat, then down to the G, and then back up to the E flat and then the B flat. And then I'm adding this quatrain pattern, A flat minor quatrain pattern, and then resolving to a D on the C major 7. And from here I'm playing a first inversion G major open voice, so spread triad, so skipping down to a B and then up to the G and then the D and ending the line on the 3rd, the E. The spread triads can be kind of difficult to play, but they're also really great right hand exercises. And you probably want to check them out just in inversions like this. And besides that, it's also useful to try and play them through the scale, like we did with the other exercises. And here you really do have to have a pretty good overview of the scale. But of course, if you're practicing this, you'll also really build your overview. So that would be something like this. When you're practicing the spread voice triads, it does make sense, especially with the inversions, to just play, just to get used to the different string skips, because you're skipping different strings all the way up. And that's quite difficult for your right hand, but it's at the same time, of course, also a really good exercise. If you want to check out some more ideas on how you can use upper structure triads and spread triads, then check out this video where I'm taking the song Out of Nowhere and then going over both an analysis but also how you can use different triads when you're soloing over it. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and it's the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. That's about it for this time. Thank you for watching, and until next week.